Good morning, Pennsylvania, and happy mud season. Does your old Honda 4Trax not have a winch? I'll let it slide if it's a sporty model, like a 250R or something, but if you've got a utility ATV like this without a winch, that's like a man without testicles. Let's fix that. We're going to install the mount, wire it up, and put some more utility in this old utility quad. Bill of materials. First, and winch. 2 to 2,500 pounds is good. I got this 2,500 pound Warren on eBay for pennies on the dollar due to the way that it is. But hey, it works and it says Honda on it. That adds horsepower, kids. These 2,000 pound Harbor Freight winches are even cheaper and work great. Despite sounding and feeling like they're going to die any minute. You'll most likely need a winch mounting plate. Happy Fart sells them pre-drilled for the winch bolts, and if you can find one that fits your quad, God bless you. But I'll be making my own out of this 1/4-inch steel plate I found on eBay. There are people who sell individual pieces of dimensional steel on eBay. Whatever size you need, no need to talk to the degenerates at your local steel supplier.
Hello!
If you buy a new winch, you may not need a wiring kit. But I didn't, so I do. I got this on Amazon. Came with the angry and sad colors, color-coded heat shrink tubing, and eyelets to make my own cables. 8 American wire gauge is fine for 2,500 pound winches. You do actually get more power from thicker wire, up to a point, less voltage drop. So I got 6 gauge. Whatever you decide, just don't buy Australian wire gauge by accident or the winch is going to run backwards. You'll need a minimum of 9 feet. 4.5 feet to go from the battery to the contactor, and about 4.5 feet to go from the contactor to the winch. Speaking of contactors, I also got my generic contactor kit on Amazon. Left in the rain, as per SOP. Comes with a contactor, pre-wired for this handy thumb switch. Condoms, brackets to mount the switch to the handlebars, and some disposable packing material. Let's start with wiring. First problem with these older machines is there's nowhere to put the damn contactor. If you put it in the boot, you have no storage for anything else. If you mount it to the frame, it's potentially exposed to water, rocks, heat, and the weather. But there is one place that's safe, dry, and otherwise not utilized. The airbox. This is the perfect stealthy home for the contactor. Just mark the holes. 2 should be plenty to hold it down. To remove the airbox, there's 2 10mm bolts here, 2 more holding the bodywork onto this bracket, and 1 holding down this intake tube. Crutch bucket. Patent pending. 4 more 10mm holding the bracket to the frame. Clampy clamps. You might be able to pull it off if the other 2 clampy clamps aren't tight. Otherwise, 1, 2, 3, and 4 10mm bolts to get this trim off. Make sure you drop as many bolts as possible, especially if you're on crutches with a broken ankle. See them in there? Removing this drain hose is optional. I find it easiest to push the airbox forward and then lift the back up and out. I through-bolt the contactors in, so I'll need to remove this heat shield and drill the holes. I'm using 10mm bolts because I'm superstitious and they fit great. Nice and tight. Now, if you bought 8 gauge wires, you can, in my experience, squeeze them all through the drain hole. Barely. But if you get 6 gauge, you're going to have to drill 5 holes. Power and ground, power to the winch, and the cable from the thumb switch. Next, we'll make the cables that run from the contactor to the battery. These eyelets are crimp-on, but I prefer to solder them. There's pros and cons to both. When you solder, it leaves a rigid end to the wire, which, if it bends too much, can theoretically break, especially with skinny wires. However, this is fat wire, and it's not going to be flexing, so the only real downside is a non-factor in this case. Just keep enough heat on it to melt the solder on contact and fill her up. Soldering has one advantage over crimping, which is much better moisture/corrosion protection, because every single exposed copper strand is now tinned with solder. Chances are, if you disagree with my decision, you're already a diehard crimping guy to the death.
Look what he can do!
Oh. Yeah, I do it all. Clamping, crimping, occasional snipping.
Both are valid methods, and you do you. Just make sure you don't install the eyelet on the other end of the cable until you've fed it through the hole in the airbox, or you're gonna have a bad time. Notice how I haven't reassembled anything on here yet. Having all of this open is going to make routing the cables much easier. It's pretty straightforward, and the quality of the job is directly proportional to how many shits you give. I give a medium amount of shits. I ran the positive battery cable, like this, up as far away from the muffler as possible. It has a heat shield, but just to be safe. A generous application of the finest Harbor Freight zip ties, up into the airbox, and to the red post on the contactor. The black post on the contactor is battery ground. To save some wire, clutter, and time, I just ran it up here to this unused M6 threaded hole in the frame. There's a lot of debate about whether winches have to be grounded at the battery or frame grounding is acceptable. Let's put the debate to bed. The answer is, of course, it depends. You just need to make sure that your frame ground has less than 0.2-ish ohms resistance to the negative battery post. First, take into account any resistance in your leads. 0.3 ohms. So from the battery to the black post on the contactor, I need less than 0.5. 0.3. Effectively, 0. Now, if you got a monster 15,000 pounder up there, it might be prudent to battery ground it, but it's fine for a 2,500 pounder like this. The handlebar controls plug right in, but the red wire needs 12 volts. I just piggyback off the red post on the contactor. The manual says it needs to be switched 12 volts, but does it? If you're worried about key-off parasitic current draw draining your battery, don't. 0.0 milliamps. Now, the only reason to make sure it's switched is so your neighbor's kid can't come over and use your winch, I guess, without the key. I don't know. I don't give a hoot. A quick functional test before I get ahead of myself here. Measuring voltage at the remaining two posts, I should have positive 12 volts one way and negative the other way. Positive 12 volts, and if I flip the switch, negative 12 volts. Bitchin'! The contactor kit came with these condoms, so might as well use them. Make it look nice, so I can keep up this facade of a man who knows what he's doing. Now to snake the small control wires down through the handlebars and up into the airbox to the contactor. The switch is simple to mount. Screw the mounting tab into the threaded brass inserts in the switch. Then install the intermediate arm. Hey, remember when I said it was simple? Yeah, it turns out I'm simple. The intermediate arm has to go on the outside of the clamp, or else it won't tighten on the handlebars.
Dad?
Yeah, bud.
Why are these tires so dirty?
Because your daddy likes to party. You can unscrew the brass inserts and swap them to the other side if you want to flip the switch upside down.
I'm so bored that we're not...
Did you say you were bored? How could you be bored? Lastly, we'll run the wire to the front of the machine. I'm going to leave the excess dangling out here because I don't know exactly how much to cut off yet, and this copper shit is expensive. When it comes to mounting on this 86 TRX350, you can either squeeze it inside like this, which protects the winch from any trees or small children or rocks you might run into, but it does make serviceability a bit of a pain. You could also mount it upside down, or even on the front if you're nuts, but I like the idea of this bull bar protecting it from impacts, and it's also out of the weather more, and I think it looks better. Marking it with a paint marker, so I know it'll clear once I weld it up. It's going to be a tight fit, boys. Probably should have gotten a 2,000 pounder. The whole bull bar assembly comes out with 4 12mm bolts and 2 more on the other side. Easy, just like your mother. I'll be running these 330 seconds, 6013 rods with 105 amps of AC current. There's a bit of a gap here, and these plain steel insulation stays are super cheap and make great filler. Just gonna tack one corner so I can make sure everything is square, or square enough. AC stick welding. When you want your welds real cheap, real easy, and real strong, but you don't need them to look real good. Carefully, and bam, 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 bam! Damn keyless chucks! Save money, they said. Buy used, they said. Click. I should probably spray the raw steel and fresh welds with a coat of black Rust-Oleum, but I'm supposed to go to my in-laws tonight, and if I spend 1 extra minute out here, my wife is gonna kick my ass. So, future me can do that. There's a 50-50 chance I wired this right, and a 90% chance I'm wrong. Pushing the in button. Hoorah! It's 50-50-90, not 50-50-100. Anyway, if you get it wrong, just swap the 2 wires going to the contactor from the winch. All right, let's take her out and pull it, and it's dark. And it's pissing rain. Well, let's assume it works, right? Right. Thanks for watching. Bunch of mentally unstable, narcissistic, chain-smoking, hateful old hypocrites. Whole house smells of ashes, regrets, and death. This broken ankle has gotten me out of a lot of stuff. Couldn't get me out of going there.